Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. I want to ask you, are your expectations based on reality? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. Hey, it is absolutely critical. If you have listened to any of my podcasts, you are probably picking up on the fact that I believe in having expectations. I believe having expectations is the absolutely correct and a critical part of you being an effective leader. You must have expectations of performance. You must have expectations of compliance. You must have expectations of efficiency, right? The list goes on and on and on based on whatever your industry is, that you need to be able to have those expectations so that you can judge how well things are going. Are you meeting the standards? Is your team meeting the standards? Are you hitting your revenue goals? Are you hitting your sales goals? All those types of different things. And when you fail to have expectations, then that's really communicating that, you don't really have a plan. You don't have goals. You don't have a target that you're going after. And when that is you as the leader, inadvertently or overtly communicating that to your team through lack of expectations, then that's when really kind of bad things happen, and you're going to wake up one day going, man, what is this business sucks, or we're about to go bankrupt, or all those types of bad things that happen in business. Now, there's a caveat, though, to expectations. Now, I've talked a lot about different aspects of expectations, the good, the bad, and some of the gotchas. And this definitely falls on the realm of the gotcha. Your expectations must be based in reality. You cannot go into a situation and create these goals, targets, expectations that are so far-fetched, so outside of the realm of historic precedents, outside the realm of even remotely possible, pending some act of God, that when you do so, you're just setting everybody up for failure. Because there's one thing to have a big goal, to have a big, like, hey man, I know we've never hit $1 million in a year in revenue, but this year we're going to hit 3 million, right? That's having a huge goal and a huge target. But when you back that up a little bit, you imply that with, this is our plan to get there. And you lay out those expectations for your team, for your people, so they can start working towards that big goal. But on the other hand, when you have an expectation that's really just thrown out there with no plan, you haven't really thought it through of, is this even theoretically possible, let alone plausibly possible, then you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I'll give you an example of this. So I recently came back from a training. I had a former coworker reach out to me and said, hey, we need you to come back and do this training. We've got this contract coming up that we want your help with. I'm like, okay, I was kind of going back and forth on it, honestly, if I wanted to do that. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to say no to this type of opportunity. If nothing else, it leaves a door open versus just shutting it. And the cost to me as far as time and distraction was fairly minimal. I mean, it was doable, right? So I agreed to it, even though I very plainly said, hey, I haven't done this for like 18 months. Like, I am out of the saddle. Like, the spin up to get me back to where you want to be will be significant. They're like, oh yeah, no big deal. Like, we totally understand. We're going to send you through this retraining program. And this, is going back to the previous episode just prior to this, with the whole training program thing. Well, come to find out in hindsight, as you can probably imagine, their expectations of my level of knowledge, my level of performance, my level of proficiency in this platform that I hadn't touched or really even thought about for the last 18 months was nowhere near based in reality, as became quickly evident. So I went up there, went through their training program, did their, what I would consider very minimal kind of re-hack, get familiar with the systems and everything again. And I go to take kind of my first, not graded event, but my first evaluation of my knowledge, and I failed. I'll be straight up with you. I failed it, and deservedly so, because the standard and the expectation of knowledge was nowhere near what reality was. Imagine learning to fly the space shuttle. Okay, imagine learning to fly the space shuttle with the 1,000 switches and all the circuit breakers and all that kind of stuff, and then you don't touch it for 18 months, and then all of a sudden somebody calls you back after getting in there for maybe twice and says, okay, take us to the moon, or shoot that landing. And you're like, whoa, what? But then in the midst of that, they're now saying, well, tell me about this system, tell me about this system, tell me about this, and explain everything to the engineer level. And you're like, man, that's just not reality. The expectation completely mismatches what is even possible. And that's kind of what happened to me. And I will say, if you are having an expectation of certain things happening or not happening based around your interviews, if you are interviewing people right now and you're going through the hiring process and you are struggling to find quality people, let alone the right people for your business, please, 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 please go to kalehouserleadership.com and download my top 10 interview questions that you must be asking in your interviews to help you find the right and quality people in your business to help it grow. Okay, kalehouserleadership.com. Do it now. So anyway, going back to this mismatch, there was by them creating this, and I will take part of the blame. 100%. I'll be full, honest, and transparent with you. I take part of the blame in that I did not ask the right questions ahead of this. Had I asked, like, okay, is the expectation after going your little retraining program to be at that level I was at 18 months ago, after being in this day in and day out? And if so, after a week of doing it, then you should probably find somebody else, because I will not be there on the timeline that you need me to be. So I do take responsibility for that. That is something that I should have kind of delved a little bit deeper into, but I kind of had an expectation on my part that they had thought through this, that they had kind of understood the limitations, especially the limitations that I was bringing after being out of the game for 18 months. But in hindsight, I guess it wasn't, or their assumption was way too high of what my ability was in order to re-assimilate. But anyway, so they had this expectation that, in my opinion, and in hindsight, and as it played out, was not based in reality for me. Now, can absolutely be somebody else that could have stepped into that, maybe that was more proficient, that had a better memory, that had other things going on, or they had stayed engaged in that community and could have been successful in that, but I was not at that level. So really, as wrapping this back around, as you that may be putting people in this type of situation as the business leader, as the one in charge of training or development, or any sort of program where you have a plan laid out, you have to kind of think through this process of, yes, you have this end goal. This is what you want to happen at the end of this process. Is it in reality? Is it in kind of plausibility that to get to that path, and maybe there's a timeline associated with it, there's a deadline that you have to get, is it even possible? And is that the person doing it the right person for the job? Do they have the skills? Do they have the mindset? Do they have the physical ability? Do they have, just the know-how and knowledge or experience to get the task accomplished? And you really need to, and that's part of your responsibility as the leader, as the one in charge of the development and the direction of your organization. You really need to be able to think through that critically and honestly, not just hopefully, like, I hope they can figure it out and just let it go at that. Like, no, make a plan and then get feedback on that plan. Because I think it became fairly evident that there was no feedback, like somebody just kind of come up with something. Like, hey, we're going to do this because it's worked in the past, but not really in this situation, but for a different situation. So it'll probably work here. And it obviously didn't. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I wanted to relay that to you because the root of this is your expectations must be based in reality. Absolutely. Have the big goals, have the big dreams, go after the big targets, but make sure as you're laying out the expectations of performance and proficiency and efficiency and all those things that go into reaching those targets and those goals can actually happen in the real world. That makes sense. All right, everybody. I hope you're doing fantastic. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share if you know somebody else that can use this content to help them in their business, in their leadership journey. I appreciate you. Have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world. Bye.